The sun was setting over the quiet town of Cedar Ridge, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Sarah leaned against the doorframe of her small apartment, clutching a steaming cup of tea. Her eyes wandered over the fading daylight, but her mind was far away, across the ocean, with Jason. Jason had been her rock, her high school sweetheart turned army boyfriend. He was the kind of person who always saw the silver lining, even in the darkest clouds. When he told her he was deploying for a year, she had smiled bravely, holding back tears as she promised to be strong for both of them. But now, months into his deployment, her bravery was starting to crack. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her loneliness press down on her chest. Cedar Ridge wasn't just quiet, it was isolating. She had moved here a year ago for a job, and though the town had its charm, she hadn't made many friends. Her closest confidant was her coworker Emily, who worked with her at a local diner. Emily had been a lifeline during those long nights when Sarah missed Jason more than she could bear. But lately, something darker had crept into Sarah's life, something she hadn't dared to share with anyone, not even Emily. A friendly face, or so she thought. It started innocently enough. Mr. Harris, her landlord, was a well-known figure in Cedar Ridge. He was in his late 40s, always dressed in crisp button-down shirts and polished shoes, and had a reputation for being helpful. When Sarah first moved in, he had gone out of his way to make her feel welcome, fixing a leaky faucet and even offering her a discount on rent for paying early. At first, Sarah appreciated his kindness. Living alone was expensive, and she was grateful for any help she could get. But over time, his friendly gestures began to feel suffocating. He started showing up unannounced, under the guise of checking the property. Once, she caught him in the hallway outside her door, with a package she hadn't ordered. It was left at the wrong address. He had said, smiling too broadly. The unease in her stomach was easy to dismiss back then. He's just being neighborly, she had told herself. But the visits became more frequent. He started asking personal questions, how she spent her weekends, whether she had friends nearby, why Jason had left her all alone. The first warning sign. The first time Sarah truly felt afraid was a late autumn evening. She had been working a double shift at the diner and came home exhausted. As she fumbled with her keys at the door, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning quickly, she saw Mr. Harris standing in the hallway, his hands in his pockets. "You shouldn't work so late, Sarah," he said, his voice smooth but tinged with something unsettling. "It's not safe for a young woman to be out by herself." Sarah forced a polite smile, her heart pounding. "Thanks for the concern, Mr. Harris. I'll be careful." That night, she locked her door and double-checked the windows. For the first time, she regretted choosing an apartment with no security cameras. Jason's letters. Jason wrote to her every week. His letters were her lifeline, filled with stories of his training exercises and jokes about his bunkmates. "I miss you like crazy," he'd written in his last letter, "but knowing you're safe and waiting for me keeps me going." Sarah held on to those letters like they were pieces of him. She would reread them on nights when the loneliness became unbearable. But as Mr. Harris's presence in her life grew more intrusive, the comfort of Jason's words began to waver. One evening, after another unexpected visit from Mr. Harris, she sat at her desk with a pen in hand, trying to write back to Jason. She wanted to tell him everything, to let him know how scared she was. But every time she started to write, she stopped herself. Jason was halfway across the world, facing dangers she couldn't even imagine. How could she burden him with her problems? Instead, she wrote, "Things are fine here. I miss you more every day. Come home soon." Emily's advice. The only person Sarah confided in was Emily. One slow afternoon at the diner, Sarah finally broke down and told her everything. Emily listened intently, her brows furrowed in concern. "Sarah, this isn't normal," Emily said, lowering her voice. "You need to report him." "To who?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "He hasn't done anything illegal. He's just there, all the time." Still, Emily insisted, you should at least document it. Write down everything he does, just in case. Sarah nodded, but the idea of confronting Mr. Harris made her stomach churn. She wasn't sure she could handle a fallout. The line is crossed. A week later, Sarah came home to find her apartment door slightly ajar. Her heart sank as she pushed it open, her hands trembling. Inside, everything looked normal, except for the bouquet of flowers sitting on her kitchen counter. There was no note, but she didn't need one. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Harris. Saw these and thought of you. Hope they brighten your day. Sarah's hands shook as she deleted the message. That night, she pushed a chair under the doorknob and slept with the lights on. The breaking point. The next day, Sarah received another letter from Jason. As she read his words, tears welled up in her eyes. He talked about the challenges of his deployment, how he was counting the days until he could see her again. You're my anchor, Sarah, he wrote. I don't know what I'd do without you. Those words broke something in her. She realized she couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. She needed to take action, not just for herself, but for Jason. He deserved to come home to someone who was safe and happy, not a shadow of the person he loved. A desperate call for help. That evening, Sarah sat on her bed, staring at her phone. Her fingers hovered over Jason's contact. She had promised herself she wouldn't distract him with her problems, but she couldn't do this alone anymore. Before she could change her mind, she pressed the call button. The line rang twice before Jason's voice came through, warm and familiar. Hey babe, he said. Is everything okay? Hearing his voice brought fresh tears to her eyes. No, Jason, she whispered. It's not. She told him everything. About Mr. Harris, the flowers, the open door. Jason listened silently, his breathing steady. When she finished, there was a long pause. Sarah, he said finally, his voice firm. I need you to listen to me. You're not alone in this. I'm going to handle it. How? She asked, her voice cracking. You're so far away. Distance doesn't matter, Jason said. I have people who can help. Trust me. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. Jason's words carried a weight that made her believe everything might be okay. The clock ticked past midnight as Sarah sat on her couch, staring at the framed photo of Jason on the coffee table. His strong, reassuring smile seemed to reach up to her, as if telling her to hold on just a little longer. The call from Jason earlier that evening had lifted a weight off her chest, but it hadn't erased the lingering fear. She felt trapped in her own home, constantly looking over her shoulder. Jason's words echoed in her mind. Trust me, Sarah. I'm going to handle it. But how? He was halfway across the world, stationed in a remote base where even a simple phone call felt like a miracle. The unexpected visitor. The next morning, Sarah woke to the sound of her doorbell ringing. Her heart skipped a beat as she hesitated, staring at the door from her bed. She wasn't expecting anyone, and after the recent incidents, every unexpected knock felt like a potential threat. Summoning her courage, she grabbed her phone and peeked through the peephole. To her surprise, a woman in her late 30s stood outside, dressed in a crisp navy suit. Her confident posture and the leather briefcase she carried suggested she wasn't someone to be trifled with. Sarah, the woman called out, her voice firm but friendly. My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm a lawyer and a friend of Jason's. May I come in? Sarah hesitated, her fingers tightening around the doorknob. Jason had mentioned he had connections, but he hadn't said anything about sending a lawyer. After a moment of deliberation, she decided to trust him and opened the door. A plan takes shape. Rachel stepped inside, her sharp eyes scanning the apartment. Jason called me last night, she began, setting her briefcase on the coffee table. He told me everything. Sarah's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The idea of Jason discussing her troubles with someone else, even someone as professional as Rachel, made her feel exposed. I didn't mean for him to involve anyone, she said softly. I just needed someone to talk to. Rachel gave her a reassuring smile. Jason cares about you deeply. He knew you wouldn't ask for help, so he asked on your behalf. And that's why I'm here." Sarah gestured for Rachel to sit, and the two women settled onto the couch. Rachel opened her briefcase, pulling out a notebook and pen. "First, I need to understand the full scope of the situation. Can you tell me everything? Every encounter, every detail about Mr. Harris?" At first, Sarah stumbled over her words, unsure of where to begin. But as she recounted the events of the past few months, Rachel listened intently, jotting down notes and asking questions. For the first time, Sarah felt like someone was truly on her side, taking her fears seriously. The legal angle. When Sarah finished her story, Rachel leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "This is more serious than you realize," she said. "What Mr. Harris has been doing isn't just inappropriate, it's harassment. And if we can prove he entered your apartment without permission, that's a criminal offense." Sarah's stomach churned. The idea of confronting Mr. Harris in a legal setting was both terrifying and exhilarating. But what if he denies everything? It's his word against mine. Rachel tapped her pen against her notebook. "That's why we need evidence. Do you have any text messages, emails, or anything else that shows his behavior?" Sarah nodded, pulling out her phone. She showed Rachel the text Mr. Harris had sent about the flowers. "This is all I've kept," she admitted. "I deleted most of his other messages because they made me uncomfortable." Rachel studied the text, her eyes narrowing. "This is a good start, but we'll need more. Going forward, document everything, every interaction, every message, every suspicious activity. And if you feel unsafe, call the police immediately." The turning point. Rachel's presence gave Sarah a newfound sense of empowerment. For the first time in months, she felt like she wasn't fighting this battle alone. Over the next few days, Rachel helped her install a security camera outside her door and advised her to keep a small notebook handy for documenting incidents. But the most impactful change came from Sarah herself. With Rachel's guidance, she began to reclaim her sense of control. She stopped flinching at every knock on the door and started walking to work with her head held high. Though the fear hadn't disappeared, it no longer consumed her. The first confrontation. One evening, as Sarah was returning from the grocery store, she saw Mr. Harris waiting by her apartment building. Her stomach tightened, but she forced herself to keep walking. When he approached her, she took a deep breath and stood her ground. "Sarah," he said, his tone overly casual, "I noticed your rent payment was a bit late this month. Is everything okay?" His words were laced with implication, but Sarah refused to let him intimidate her. "My rent is up to date," she said firmly. "And unless this is an official matter, I'd appreciate it if you didn't approach me outside my home." Mr. Harris's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing. "I'm just trying to be helpful," he said, his voice cold. Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she walked past him, her heart pounding in her chest. As soon as she reached her apartment, she wrote down the interaction in her notebook and notified Rachel. Jason's reinforcement. That night, Sarah received a video call from Jason. Seeing his face, even on a small screen, filled her with a mix of relief and longing. She updated him on everything that had happened since Rachel's arrival, including her confrontation with Mr. Harris. "I'm so proud of you," Jason said, his voice filled with admiration. "You're stronger than you think, Sarah." His words brought tears to her eyes. "I wouldn't have made it this far without you. And Rachel, I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You don't need to repay me," Jason said with a smile. "Just promise me you'll keep fighting. And remember, I've got your back, no matter how far away I am." Rachel's investigation. While Sarah worked on rebuilding her confidence, Rachel was busy gathering evidence against Mr. Harris. She reached out to other tenants in the building, discreetly asking if they had experienced similar behavior. To her surprise, 2 women came forward, describing their own unsettling encounters with the landlord. Armed with this information, Rachel began building a case. She filed a formal complaint with the local housing authority and contacted the police to report Mr. Harris's unauthorized entry into Sarah's apartment. A glimmer of hope. 1 week later, Sarah received a call from the police. They informed her that they had opened an investigation into Mr. Harris and would be conducting interviews with the tenants. Though the process was just beginning, it felt like a victory, a small but significant step toward justice. When Sarah shared the news with Jason, his pride was evident. "This is just the beginning," he said. "You're taking your power back, Sarah." And I couldn't be prouder. Sarah stood in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. The bruises under her eyes from sleepless nights had faded, but the anxiety still lingered like a shadow. The recent progress with Rachel's help had given her a glimmer of hope, but it hadn't erased the lingering fear that seemed to follow her everywhere. Her phone buzzed on the counter, startling her. It was a text from Rachel. "The police want to meet with you today. I'll be there at 3 p.m. Don't worry. We've got this." Sarah inhaled deeply, steadying herself. Today was the day she'd have to recount everything to the authorities. It was a necessary step, but the thought of reliving those moments made her stomach churn. Facing the authorities. The small conference room at the Cedar Ridge Police Department felt sterile and cold. Sarah sat across from Officer Daniels, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. Rachel sat beside her, her presence a comforting anchor. "Sarah," Officer Daniels began, "I want you to know that we take these matters very seriously. It's brave of you to come forward." Sarah nodded, gripping the edge of her chair. She started from the beginning, recounting every interaction with Mr. Harris, from the unsettling visits to the flowers he had left in her apartment. Her voice trembled at times, but Rachel's reassuring nods kept her steady. "Did he ever explicitly threaten you?" Daniels asked gently. "No," Sarah admitted, "but he didn't have to. The way he looked at me, the things he said, it was enough to make me feel unsafe." Daniels scribbled notes, then looked up. "Thank you for sharing this, Sarah. We'll follow up with the other tenants Rachel mentioned. In the meantime, if you feel threatened or see him anywhere he shouldn't be, don't hesitate to call 911. As they left the station, Rachel put a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You did great. This is the hardest part, putting it all out there. From here on, you're not alone in this fight." A community rallies. Word spread quickly through the building after the police began interviewing tenants. Sarah wasn't the only one who had experienced Mr. Harris's inappropriate behavior, and Rachel's quiet investigation uncovered a troubling pattern. Several women came forward, sharing stories of unwelcome advances, inappropriate comments, and moments that made their skin crawl. For the first time, Sarah realized she wasn't alone. The other tenants began to check in on her, offering words of encouragement and solidarity. Emily, ever the loyal friend, started walking Sarah home from the diner each night, armed with pepper spray and an attitude that could rival a storm. "Let him try something," Emily said one evening, her voice fierce. "He'll regret the day he messed with you." Sarah smiled, grateful for Emily's unwavering support. It felt like a small army was forming around her, a network of people who believed in her and wanted to see her safe. Mr. Harris' retaliation. As the investigation gained traction, Mr. Harris' demeanor shifted. The once overly friendly landlord now avoided Sarah altogether, his polite smile replaced with a cold, calculating stare. But his absence didn't bring relief. It made her more anxious. She knew he was aware of the complaints, and the uncertainty of his next move was maddening. Then, one evening, Sarah found a notice slipped under her door. Immediate eviction notice for non-compliance with lease agreement. Her heart raced as she read the words. She hadn't violated any terms of her lease. This was retaliation, plain and simple. Rachel arrived within the hour, her face set in a grim expression. "This is illegal," she said, holding up the notice. "He can't evict you without cause, especially not while an investigation is ongoing. We'll fight this." But Sarah's confidence wavered. What if he finds another way to push me out? What if he won't stop until I'm gone? Rachel's eyes softened. He's trying to scare you, Sarah. Don't let him win. We'll take this to court if we have to. Jason's message of strength. That night, Sarah received another video call from Jason. The connection was patchy, but his voice came through clear. Rachel told me about the eviction notice, he said, his expression dark. I wish I could be there, Sarah. This wouldn't be happening if I was. You're already doing so much, Sarah replied, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know how I'd be handling this without you. Jason's eyes softened. You're stronger than you think, Sarah. You're facing this head-on. And that takes guts. I'm so proud of you. His words gave her a renewed sense of determination. She wasn't going to let Mr. Harris drive her out of her home, not without a fight. The evidence breakthrough. A week later, Rachel arrived at Sarah's apartment with a triumphant smile. We've got him, she said, holding up her phone. One of the other tenants installed a hidden camera in their hallway a few months ago. It caught Harris entering their apartment without permission and stealing a package. Sarah's jaw dropped. You're kidding. This footage is enough to get a search warrant for his office, Rachel continued. If he's been keeping records or surveillance of his tenants, we'll find it. Sure enough, the police executed a search warrant a few days later. What they uncovered was chilling. Detailed notes about several tenants, including Sarah, as well as photos taken without their knowledge. It was damning evidence that painted a clear picture of harassment and invasion of privacy. Confronting the fear. Despite the mounting evidence against Mr. Harris, Sarah couldn't shake the fear that gripped her. She still jumped at every unexpected sound, still double-checked the locks before going to bed. But with Rachel's help, she decided to take a bold step toward reclaiming her life. One evening, she hosted a tenant meeting in her apartment. Women who had once been strangers now sat together, united by their shared experiences. Emily brought snacks, and Rachel explained their legal rights and the steps being taken to hold Mr. Harris accountable. By the end of the night, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in months. Empowerment. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was part of a community fighting for justice. The arrest. The day Mr. Harris was arrested, the building buzzed with quiet excitement. Tenants peeked through their windows as police led him away in handcuffs. Sarah watched from her living room, a mix of emotions swirling inside her. Relief, vindication, and a lingering sadness that it had taken so long for justice to be served. Jason called later that evening. I heard the news, he said, his voice filled with pride. You did it, Sarah. You stood up for yourself and for everyone else he hurt. Sarah smiled, tears streaming down her face. We did it, she corrected. I couldn't have done this without you. The morning after Mr. Harris's arrest, the air in Cedar Ridge felt lighter. The oppressive tension that had hung over Sarah's apartment building for months was finally lifting. As she stepped outside to retrieve her mail, a few neighbors smiled at her, genuine, supportive smiles that felt like a silent acknowledgement of her courage. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. But as she sifted through her mail, she noticed an official-looking envelope with her landlord's name printed on it. Her heart sank as she opened it, revealing another eviction notice. Though Mr. Harris was now in custody, his legal team had not backed down. Rachel arrived later that afternoon, her expression one of calm determination. This is just another scare tactic, she assured Sarah, tossing the notice onto the coffee table. They're trying to intimidate you into leaving before the case goes to court, but we're not letting that happen. Sarah nodded, though the anxiety gnawed at her. The arrest had been a significant victory, but the battle was far from over. The legal strategy. Rachel spent the next week preparing for the court proceedings. She worked tirelessly, filing motions to contest the eviction and gathering evidence to strengthen the case against Mr. Harris. Sarah, meanwhile, found herself thrust into a whirlwind of legal paperwork, witness interviews, and depositions. It was exhausting, but Rachel made sure Sarah stayed informed every step of the way. This isn't just about you, Rachel explained during one late-night meeting. It's about setting a precedent. If we win, It'll send a message to landlords like Harris that they can't exploit their tenants. Sarah appreciated Rachel's resolve, but the pressure of being at the center of such a high-stakes case weighed heavily on her. Some nights, she lay awake, wondering if she had made the right choice by staying and fighting. But then she would remember Jason's words, "You're stronger than you think," and find the strength to carry on. Jason's encouragement. Jason's support during this time was unwavering. Despite the distance and the demands of his deployment, he found ways to remind Sarah she wasn't alone. One evening, she opened her mailbox to find a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a bracelet with a single charm, an anchor. There was a handwritten note tucked inside. "For my anchor, Sarah, just like this charm, you keep me grounded, no matter how far apart we are. I'm with you every step of the way." The simple gesture brought tears to her eyes. She slipped the bracelet onto her wrist and vowed to wear it every day as a reminder of Jason's faith in her. Facing backlash, not everyone in Cedar Ridge was supportive of Sarah's fight. While many of her neighbors rallied around her, others whispered behind her back, accusing her of overreacting or seeking attention. Some even suggested that she should have moved out quietly instead of dragging the whole building into her drama. One afternoon at the diner, Sarah overheard two regulars discussing the case. "She's blowing this whole thing out of proportion," one man said, shaking his head. "Harris was always polite to me." Emily, who had been wiping down the counter nearby, slammed her rag onto the surface. "Maybe because you're not a young woman living alone," she snapped. "Why don't you keep your opinions to yourself?" The man muttered something under his breath and left, but Sarah felt a pang of guilt. She hated the idea of her fight causing tension in the community, but Emily refused to let her dwell on it. "Let them talk," Emily said firmly. "You're doing the right thing, Sarah. Don't ever doubt that." Therapy and healing. As the legal proceedings continued, Rachel suggested that Sarah seek counseling to help process everything she had been through. At first, Sarah hesitated. She had always prided herself on her independence and resilience, but as the days wore on, she realized she couldn't carry the emotional weight alone. Her first session with Dr. Patel, a local therapist, was nerve-wracking. Sarah found herself stumbling over her words, unsure of how to articulate her feelings. But Dr. Patel's gentle demeanor and empathetic questions soon put her at ease. "Sarah," Dr. Patel said during one session, "you've been through a traumatic experience, but you've also shown incredible strength. Healing isn't just about moving on. It's about learning to trust yourself again." Those words resonated deeply with Sarah. Over time, therapy became a safe space where she could unpack her fears, frustrations, and hopes. She began to see herself not as a victim, but as a survivor. The courtroom battle. The day of the eviction hearing arrived, and Sarah felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach as she walked into the courtroom. Rachel was by her side, her confidence a steadying force. On the other side of the room sat Mr. Harris's lawyer, a slick, sharp-suited man who wasted no time trying to discredit Sarah's claims. "She has no proof that my client ever intended to harm her," the lawyer argued. "This is nothing more than a baseless attempt to smear his reputation." But Rachel was prepared. She presented the footage from the hidden camera, along with testimony from other tenants and copies of the threatening texts Mr. Harris had sent. As the evidence piled up, the judge's expression grew increasingly stern. When it was Sarah's turn to testify, she took a deep breath and recounted her story with unwavering honesty. Though her voice shook at times, she refused to let fear control her. By the time she finished, the courtroom was silent. The verdict. After a tense deliberation, the judge ruled in Sarah's favor. Not only was the eviction notice deemed invalid, but Mr. Harris was also ordered to pay damages for emotional distress and legal fees. It was a resounding victory, one that left Sarah feeling both relieved and overwhelmed. Outside the courtroom, Rachel hugged her tightly. "You did it," she said, her voice filled with pride. "You stood up for yourself, and for everyone else he tried to intimidate. A new beginning." With the legal battle behind her, Sarah began to focus on rebuilding her life. She used the damages awarded by the court to make much-needed repairs to her apartment and even started a small savings fund for emergencies. But more importantly, she began to reclaim her sense of peace. She continued her sessions with Dr. Patel, finding new ways to manage her anxiety and rebuild her confidence. She also started volunteering at a local women's shelter, sharing her story with others who had experienced harassment or abuse. One evening, she received a surprise video call from Jason. He had finally been granted leave and would be coming home in a few weeks. The news filled Sarah with a sense of joy and anticipation she hadn't felt in months. Reflections. As Sarah sat on her balcony that night, watching the stars, she reflected on how far she had come. The road had been long and fraught with challenges, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient than she ever thought possible. She glanced down at the bracelet on her wrist, running her fingers over the anchor charm. Jason was right. She had been his anchor during his deployment, but in many ways, he had been hers as well. The sound of the gavel echoed in Sarah's mind long after the courtroom had emptied. The judge's words, "The eviction is invalid, and damages are awarded to the plaintiff," had marked the end of a chapter that had once seemed insurmountable. But as Sarah returned to her apartment that evening, she realized the verdict was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of something new. A life built on courage, resilience, and the determination to never let fear control her again. The weight of victory. Sarah stood in the doorway of her apartment, staring at the familiar space that had been both her sanctuary and her prison. She had won, but the weight of what she had endured still lingered. Every corner of the room seemed to hold a memory, a flash of fear, a moment of doubt. But now, those memories were joined by something else, a sense of triumph. Rachel had insisted on celebrating the victory. That night, Sarah found herself surrounded by friends and neighbors who had supported her throughout the ordeal. Emily, of course, was at the center of the gathering, raising a toast with her usual flair. To Sarah, Emily declared, her voice ringing with pride, "The bravest person I know. You didn't just stand up for yourself, you stood up for all of us." The room erupted in cheers, and Sarah felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in a long time. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly believe she had made a difference. Jason's homecoming. 2 weeks later, the day Sarah had been longing for finally arrived. Jason's plane landed at the local airport, and Sarah waited anxiously at the arrivals gate. When she saw him walking toward her, his duffel bag slung over one shoulder, her heart swelled with relief and joy. As soon as he reached her, Jason dropped his bag and pulled her into a tight embrace. "I missed you so much," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I missed you too," Sarah replied, her tears soaking into his uniform. "I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you." Jason pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "You did it, Sarah. You fought back, and you won. I'm so proud of you." They spent the evening catching up, sharing stories and laughter over a home-cooked meal. For the first time in months, Sarah felt like her life was hers again, with Jason by her side as her partner and her anchor. Paying it forward. With Jason's encouragement, Sarah decided to turn her experience into a force for good. She began volunteering at the Cedar Ridge Women's Advocacy Center, sharing her story with women who were struggling to find their voices. Her honesty and vulnerability resonated deeply with the group, and many women approached her afterward to thank her for inspiring them. One of these women was a single mother named Denise, who had been dealing with a controlling landlord for years. "Hearing you talk about what you went through made me realize I'm not alone," Denise said, her voice trembling. "I want to fight back too, but I don't know where to start." Sarah smiled warmly. "You don't have to do it alone," she said. "I'll help you." Over the next few weeks, Sarah worked with Denise, connecting her with resources and guiding her through the process of filing a formal complaint. It was a small victory, but it reaffirmed Sarah's belief in the power of community and support. Healing together. As Sarah helped others find their strength, she continued to work on her own healing. Her therapy sessions with Dr. Patel became a cornerstone of her journey, offering a safe space to explore the lingering fears and doubts that still surfaced from time to time. One day, Dr. Patel asked a question that took Sarah by surprise. "What does empowerment mean to you?" Sarah thought for a moment before replying. "It means knowing I have a voice and the courage to use it. It means standing up for myself, even when it's hard, and helping others do the same." Dr. Patel nodded, a satisfied smile on her face. "You've come a long way, Sarah. Don't forget to acknowledge how far you've traveled on this journey." Reclaiming her space. With Jason's help, Sarah decided to redecorate her apartment as a way of reclaiming it as her own. They spent a weekend painting the walls, hanging new curtains, and adding personal touches that made the space feel fresh and welcoming. As they worked, Jason paused to admire Sarah's determination. "This place already feels different," he said, rolling up his sleeves for another coat of paint. "It feels like you." Sarah laughed, splashing a bit of paint in his direction. "It's about time. No more shadows, no more fear, just a space that feels like home." By the time they finished, the apartment was unrecognizable. The fresh colors and cozy decor reflected not just Sarah's style, but her journey, a transformation from fear to empowerment. Community recognition. Word of Sarah's bravery spread beyond the walls of her apartment building. The Cedar Ridge Gazette published a feature story about her fight for justice, highlighting her resilience and the positive changes she was making in the community. The article caught the attention of a local nonprofit organization that worked to protect tenants' rights. They reached out to Sarah, inviting her to join their advocacy efforts. Though she was initially hesitant, Jason encouraged her to take the leap. "This is your chance to make an even bigger impact," he said. "You've already inspired so many people. Imagine what you could do on a larger scale." Sarah accepted the invitation, becoming a spokesperson for the organization. Her first public speaking event was nerve-wracking, but as she stood in front of the crowd, she felt the same determination that had carried her through the courtroom. "My story is just one example of what happens when we stand up for ourselves and each other," she told the audience. "Together, we can create a world where no one has to face this kind of fear alone." Looking to the future, as the months passed, Sarah's life continued to evolve. Her relationship with Jason grew stronger, and they began discussing their future together. Though the scars of her ordeal would always remain, they no longer defined her. Instead, they served as a reminder of her strength and resilience. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Jason took her hand. "I know we've been through a lot," he said, his voice steady. "But I can't imagine my life without you. I want us to build a future together, one where we face every challenge as a team." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she nodded. "I want that too, Jason. More than anything." A ripple effect. Sarah's journey had a ripple effect that extended far beyond her own life. The tenants in her building formed a stronger sense of community, supporting each other in ways they hadn't before. Denise, the single mother Sarah had helped, became an advocate for tenants' rights, inspired by Sarah's example. Even Rachel, who had seen countless cases in her career, found herself deeply moved by Sarah's story. "You remind me why I became a lawyer in the first place," Rachel told her one day. "It's not just about winning cases. It's about making a difference." The power of one voice. As Sarah reflected on everything she had been through, she realized that her greatest strength had come from her willingness to speak up. It hadn't been easy, and there were moments when she wanted to give up. But by finding her voice, she had not only changed her own life, but had also inspired others to do the same. Her story was far from over, but Sarah knew one thing for certain. She would never let fear silence her again. The crisp morning air carried a sense of renewal as Sarah stood outside the Cedar Ridge Community Center. The building had once been an aging relic of the past, but today it was bustling with life. Colorful banners hung over the entrance, bearing the words "Empowerment through Action," "Tenant Rights," and "Safety Fair." Sarah had spent the past few months organizing the event with a nonprofit organization that had taken notice of her story. It was a gathering meant to educate tenants, connect them with resources, and inspire them to stand up for their rights. For Sarah, it was more than an event. It was a culmination of everything she had endured, learned, and achieved. The start of something new. As Sarah walked through the crowd, she spotted Denise setting up a table filled with brochures about local housing laws. Denise's face lit up when she saw Sarah. "Can you believe this turnout?" she asked, gesturing toward the dozens of people milling about. "This is all because of you." Sarah shook her head, smiling modestly. "It's because of all of us. We did this together." In truth, Sarah still found it surreal to think of herself as a leader in this movement. She had started out as someone afraid to speak up, yet here she was, standing tall among the community that had rallied together for change. A special guest. Jason arrived just as the event was hitting its stride. Dressed casually in a flannel shirt and jeans, he looked like a far cry from the uniformed soldiers Sarah had first fallen for. Yet his presence carried the same warmth and strength that had always made her feel safe. "I wouldn't miss this for the world," he said, pulling her into a hug. "Look at all these people, Sarah. You've created something incredible." Sarah felt her cheeks flush. "It's not just me. It's everyone who decided to stand up and fight." Jason grinned. "Still, you're the spark that started it all." The panel discussion. One of the day's main attractions was a panel discussion featuring Sarah, Rachel, and other advocates for tenants' rights. The room was packed, with standing room only by the time the session began. As Sarah took her seat at the front of the room, she felt a flutter of nerves. Public speaking still wasn't her favorite thing, but she knew the importance of sharing her story. Rachel began the session by introducing each panelist and providing an overview of the issues they were tackling. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she took a deep breath and focused on the faces in the audience, people who had come to learn, to be inspired, and to take action. "My journey began with fear," she started, her voice steady. "Fear of speaking up, fear of being alone, fear of retaliation. But over time, I realized that staying silent was worse than any fear I could face. By finding my voice, I not only changed my own life, but I also discovered the power of community." As Sarah spoke, she saw heads nodding and heard murmurs of agreement. When she finished, the room erupted in applause, and she felt a swell of pride. She wasn't just telling her story, she was helping others find their own strength. A surprise reunion. After the panel, Sarah was approached by an older woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes. "Sarah, you may not remember me, but I lived in your building for a few months before all this happened," the woman said. Sarah tilted her head, trying to place her. The woman smiled. "I moved out because of Mr. Harris. I didn't have the courage to stand up to him like you did. But when I heard about what you were doing, it inspired me to come back today, to say thank you." Emotion welled up in Sarah's chest. "I didn't know," she said softly. "I'm so glad you're here." The woman squeezed Sarah's hand. "What you've done has made a difference, not just for me, but for so many others. New challenges, new opportunities." Though the event was a success, Sarah knew the fight for tenants' rights was far from over. Over the following weeks, she worked closely with the nonprofit to draft a proposal for stricter tenant protection laws in Cedar Ridge. The process was slow and often frustrating, but Sarah's determination never wavered. At the same time, she began taking classes in public policy and advocacy, eager to deepen her knowledge and skills. Jason was her biggest cheerleader, encouraging her to chase her newfound passion. "You've found your calling," he said one evening as they studied together at the kitchen table. "I can't wait to see what you do next." An unexpected recognition. One afternoon, Sarah received a letter in the mail bearing the seal of the Cedar Ridge Town Council. She opened it cautiously, her heart racing. Inside was an invitation to attend an upcoming council meeting, where she would be recognized for her contributions to the community. When the day of the meeting arrived, Sarah sat nervously in the audience, clutching Jason's hand. As her name was called, she walked to the podium, her legs trembling slightly. The mayor smiled warmly as he handed her a plaque. "Sarah has shown us what it means to be brave," he said. "Her courage and perseverance have not only brought justice to our town, but have also paved the way for meaningful change. Cedar Ridge is proud to honor her today." The applause that followed was thunderous, and Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. She glanced at Jason, who gave her a proud nod. This was a moment she would never forget. Building a legacy. Inspired by the recognition, Sarah decided to take her advocacy efforts to the next level. She partnered with Rachel and other local leaders to establish a foundation dedicated to protecting tenants' rights and providing resources for those facing harassment or discrimination. The foundation quickly gained traction, attracting support from community members, businesses, and even regional organizations. Sarah found herself busier than ever, but the work was deeply fulfilling. Each success, no matter how small, felt like a step toward a better future. Reflecting on the journey. One evening, Sarah and Jason sat together on the balcony of their newly redecorated apartment. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the town that had become the backdrop for so much of their story. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Jason asked, his voice thoughtful. Sarah smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "All the time. It's hard to believe I used to feel so powerless. Now, I feel like I can take on anything." Jason kissed the top of her head. "That's because you can. You've proven it over and over." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the first stars appeared in the sky. Though the road had been long and often difficult, Sarah felt at peace. She had faced her fears, found her voice, and built a life she could be proud of. A message of hope. As Sarah continued her work with the foundation, she often reflected on the power of community and the importance of standing up for what was right. She began writing a book about her experiences, hoping to reach an even wider audience with her message. In the book's introduction, she wrote, "This story is not just mine. It belongs to every person who has faced fear and found the courage to fight back. It is a testament to the strength we all have within us and the incredible things we can achieve when we come together." The legacy lives on. Though Sarah's journey was far from over, she had already left a lasting mark on Cedar Ridge and beyond. Her story became a source of inspiration for countless others, proving that one voice truly could make a difference. As she looked toward the future, Sarah knew there would be more challenges to face, but she also knew she had the strength, the support, and the determination to overcome them, just as she always had.